It's all good. Yeah, I'll wait just like a little bit more. Here, I'll just play this while we wait, actually.
Okay, yeah.
Just make sure the project doesn't die. Cool. Sweet. What's up, everybody? I'm gonna stop that. Holy shit. Okay, there we go. I'm Rebel Scum. And this is my track Fade. It's unreleased. So I was glad to get you guys a little sneak preview though, because I think it's one of my better ones and some of more of the stuff that I'm working on now. And drum and bass is really cool. And so so I really wanted to share it here. If you guys are listening too, feel free to unmute yourselves at any time and just interrupt me and ask a question if you have one, because I want to be able to show what you guys want to see, you know? So I'm not just like wasting time running around looking at a bunch of different stuff. But I figured we would start with this one and we can kind of just do a track breakdown and take a look at like some of the cooler things about it. So I'm just going to jump in. Also, I mean, there's a chat too. So if you guys want to pop questions in the chat too, you can do that there. Sorry we had to do this on Zoom, but Discord just hates me basically. And CPU load is insane when I was trying to test it earlier. And so Zoom might have like a little lower quality, but at least it works, you know, and we don't get like crazy 100 million % CPU usage. So I'll go into this one and start just kind of talking about it a little bit. The first thing that happens in this intro, it's like pretty light. And this is pretty basic. What I wanted to start with was just having like a really like tight sounding, really simple drum and bass kind of intro to get into the build or like a theme section. So normally, like this is actually how I started this one, was in the intro, but I start songs a ton of different ways. Just depends on what I'm working on. I find that a lot of the time sound design will lend itself to writing drops first, which makes sense, right? So you have a sound design session and you have stuff and you're like, oh, I could do that in a certain way. And then you do that. And then intros, I know a lot of people can only start songs via the intro because they need to have it like lead into the drop, and that's fine too. But this one just started with that, and it's really simple. One of my favorite things to do is like reuse a lot of the sounds. So something that I've been getting into the habit of is marking my instruments with colors and putting them over here. So these are all reusable, kind of like Rebel Scum sounds, basically. And I think like the main thing that I started with in this one is like this tiny little pluck, I think. Hold on one second, I gotta move you guys out of the way. There we go. This tiny little pluck. And this just has like a delay on it. This is like super simple, and one of my favorite things to do is just like little tiny plucks with like a little delay to create atmosphere. And in my other track, Universe, which I'll go over in a little bit, it's really fun throwing in arpeggiated little melodies that have a crazy delay into granular synthesis and plugins like Portal, because they'll mess with it and do some really cool rhythms and that sort of thing, and really like bring them out. And then you can take those and bounce them to audio and like stretch them and mess with them and do all fun kinds of stuff. So that's basically it. The other thing that I've been using a lot recently is Diva. I don't know if you guys have used Diva before, but it's a really cool analog style emulator synth. And it's super dope because you can take pieces and switch them around. So I can change like the oscillator section from digital to analog and all these different types. Same with like the filter section and ADSR sections for the amp and envelope. And so I've also kind of decided that those are kind of the sounds that I really like, that kind of like synth wavy type, older type sounds. And there's a lot of really good places to start in there, because I got tired of just like trying to make my own melodic like synths. It's a lot harder than you would think. There's really cool ways to do it using audio and like sampling reverb tails and stuff like that. And that's really cool new way to get like cool new sounds. But if in general I'm just writing a track, I'm not trying to like write a lead or like a chord like synth patch, because it just takes so much time. And in my sound design sessions, I'm just doing basses, pretty much, or like drums if I really feel like it. So that's a tip. Find a synth that you like a lot, that you can just go and just flip through the presets and then just go and just run with it, because you can really crush your workflow if you're just trying to like write a really cool like lead or something like that, which some people find harder than others. So it just depends on what you're doing. The meat of this one, this is like the intro and build are super simple. Like you guys can probably dissect it already yourselves. There's just builds and like stacked risers and blah, 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 blah. But the meat of this track really is the main Reese. So I want to go over that because that's pretty much the main bit. I think this is it. So I've been messing around with Vital, and Vital's really cool just because it's like Serum, but not Serum, it's different. And it's sometimes nice to just have a different synth to look at. You guys can see this, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. And if you guys have messed with it, it's basically, well, it's free, first of all, unless you pay for the other wavetables and stuff like that. But this is it. This is like a really simple Reese. It just came together with a little bit of pitch bend and like movement here with this one LFO. Like this is like barely any movement on it, but it sounds really good just because of what it's running through. And so it's just a couple saw waves. They're at the same octave. And what I try to do with Reese's and just basses in general is I try to have one of my oscillators be a little bit more mono than the others. and then have other ones spread wide. These ones are actually kind of not too different. This one's a really wide sounding Reese. And so I think traditionally it's not like one of those really deep kind of like guttural sounding ones that happens just after this one in this tune, but it's really like wide and like raspy. It's like a foghorn basically. And the key to foghorns is just stacking saw waves. I've found you can add a little bit of FM if you want to. This one doesn't have any of that. And then just using filters to add vowel movement, like you guys have probably seen before. So like classic vowel movement are like a low pass with a notch going backwards. And having the movement that you can program in here is really cool on Reese's. So sometimes programming Reese's this way, where you have just one main LFO on everything, can really be the trick. It's not like we're making crazy tear out or anything like that. So there's not a lot of LFO work. It's very simple, which I kind of like. And that's my favorite thing about drum and bass too. The other thing is like FX section, super simple as well. Distortion, OTT. And these are pretty stock. There's automation on there, which is kind of weird. I mean, I don't know why I did that, but I did, and there it is. So the key is to like do stuff that is really simple. So if I like group all these and then turn this off, this is gonna sound silly. That's what it starts out as. And so a lot of the time when you're working with a synth and you're trying to make a cool bass, that's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for something that is begging to be OTT'd, if that makes sense, because it doesn't already have like a ton of crazy high end, and the wavetables aren't already like crazy and like have all these, harmonics and stuff going on, because those, if you take those and you try to OTT those are really bad. So my other tip is like one you might have heard before, which is basically use basic shapes. Just use basic shapes and then mess with it afterwards. So going on after that, there's just a little bit of the mids taken out. Overdrive is really great. And then the key to this thing, I think, and what I've been having a lot of fun with, is using thermal. Thermal is super dope. It is the like brother to Portal, but it's distortion plugin. And really what it's awesome for is just flipping through all of these presets and then just deciding which ones are best. And there's stages of this as we go through it, So we have, here, let me just like, oh, that's a different thing. I'll show you guys that in a little bit. Okay, LFO tool is off. Just remember that. So here we go, overdrive. It gives a lot of the crunchiness there, and I didn't even touch it. Look, everything is stock, so that's fun. And then you have thermal, OTT. Stages of OTT and distortion going together are really the way to do it. One thing that I'm learning now too is doing like gain staging before you run it through crazy distortion and saturation. So if you have like a saturator, if I had like thermal here, it's gonna sound, maybe it depends on the craziness of the preset that you've chosen or the type of distortion. But basically, if you mess with your gain before you run it through a lot of distortion, you can actually control a lot of the like the scratchiness and the like crunchy highs that you get through there. And this is no problem. Like ducking it down this much is fine if you like the sound, even though it's really quiet, because what we can do after that is just boost it up with a bunch of other stuff. But this is something that I've, just more recently started doing, but it's a really good tip also. And that's really important. And that's also something actually that I learned in Cone Sound's Patreon, because they have a really fucking good Patreon that I just joined like 2 days ago. And they have a crazy neuro bass tutorial that I'm even trying to go. I've watched it like 3 times already, and I'm going through really slowly. So it's a really good thing. Definitely check that out, because they have a bunch of other videos on that I haven't even looked at. Decapitator, pretty good saturator. If you guys have the Sound Toys stuff, you'll know that this is a really great, basically saturator. It adds a lot of crunchiness. It also adds like a lot of body to sounds. So sometimes it can get way too crazy. So it's good to keep it in check, especially if you have punish on. But this one like needed a lot of help basically, because you guys heard the patch before. Before we had any processing on it, and so it needed a lot of that push to get there. Thermal again. This is probably just Rejuvenator preset. Adds a crazy amount of highs. So that one's really huge for this sound in particular, just because it adds a lot of that high end and creates that kind of sense of bigness. And then we have EQ. I found that a lot of my tunes, well, actually, it just depends on what you're working on, but a lot of the sounds that I end up making, just depending on what kind of post-processing style I'm going for, they end up having like a lot of these really bad areas, these frequencies for your ears. And I don't know if you guys have heard this before. Probably, I would assume that you've heard this before, but right around 3.4 kilohertz is where we're most sensitive to just sounds in general. And so that's like alarms and like babies crying and yada, yada, yada. So having dips in this areas really help, especially if you're pushing stuff with OTT, really helps to do that. Another thing too is that having these low passes on here are really helpful too. And this can be in, groups on individual sounds or like whole mixes, just because there's a lot of this high end up here. This is pretty far down. We're in 14,000 hertz, but like above 18,000, can you really hear it? I don't know, not too much. And also you can save a lot of headroom by doing that. And you'll notice that if I play this, like if this one is funny, because I was looking at the mastering channel and kind of laughing earlier while we were listening to it, because there's no EQ on it or anything like that. But what you'll see is that a lot of guys, when you load like a track in and you're using span, span is really sweet. You guys should get span. Basically, it's free. And I'm sure a lot of people know about it already, but it's a really helpful tool in understanding the shape of what your overall tracks should look like and sound like. Ahi has a really cool video out about it. If you guys know Ahi, he's a really cool guy. He has a really good YouTube page as well that goes over how he uses span to kind of like dissect his tunes and check their mixes. And what you'll notice is, like, I'm going to play this and you'll see that there's no drop off right here. But if we load it in like a professional track, everybody always pulls out this area just because it's pretty unnecessary. So sometimes it's really important to do that on individual sounds as well, so it doesn't build up. But yeah, so here, let me actually play it. I'll show you. You see, like, there's no dip right there, but a lot of the times we won't have that area hanging out. So that's something to think about when you go in to do your masters, because you have a lot of that like really, really high, really sparkly frequencies that aren't necessary. So anyway, what else we got? We have ozone. This is just, Reese's are full spectrum basses, essentially. They really take up like a whole bunch of space, which is why it's helpful to have a lot of room in your tracks, which is something that I really wanted to do with this one. And you can tell because it's like one bass, nothing, another bass, nothing, another bass, and that's how the track is organized. So not only in like frequency wise, you need to be aware that like Reese's and some basses take up a lot of space, so they're really hard to manage. That also, when you're writing the track, the way that you write it really helps when you're going to be like when you're trying to mix things down, because the less stuff you have going on, the easier it is to make one thing sound like really big. And you listen to like a lot of pro tracks and they only have a couple things going on at one time, like three things, like a bass, like a kick or a snare, and maybe some other drums or something like that. But you can tell that you're not just like trying to squeeze all this stuff into your headroom, and that really is what makes things sound big, because this is a really simple bass. So just adding reverb and doing crazy, pitch bends and stuff like that really helps. But this was just to tame it and make sure that my lows were centered and that I had everything else as you go up are spread. So that's just a way that I like to use ozone too. this last thing is just a washout rack. You guys probably have heard of Bass Clef's washout rack that is going around, like everybody has it. It's pretty old. It's been around for a really long time. I just did the same thing for myself, and you guys could do this too. This is pretty easy. So there's like areas where like stuff will wash out. Let me see. Yeah. So having the wash up and a really long decay, you also basically combine it with an auto filter to keep everything down. Sometimes I do auto filter and the wash as I am like working to like tweak this effect rack, but underwater is essentially what I'm doing here anyway. I'm just like cheating and going around it, but underwater would be like a low pass filter with a big reverb, and then wash is like a high pass filter with a big reverb. And so as you turn it, it's like basically a big like build kind of plugin, something that you can use to fill space and drops. And there's also Data Life makes Endless Smile, which is basically the same thing, but it's like a really good version. So I might get that eventually. I was just trying to make my own. And I encourage you guys to do this kind of thing too, because it could be super helpful. So there's that one. That's the main Reese on there. And again, like this is really, it's really important to save sounds like this to use, because this is my fade Reese. Like if I search it in here, I just am stressing this stuff, like even though it's not that fun, it's not like that, it's not like a cool thing to do, but organizing your sounds and your instruments is really important, because you can keep building off of them, and then that's a way to develop signature sound, which is, I think, is something that everybody struggles with. Like, how do I make my own sound? You know what I mean? And it's about finding those little sound design tricks that you like, oh, I love this thing. I've done like a lot of like lessons and kind of mentoring with Bandles, DeAndre from Bandles, and like this is a really good example. He basically will use a flange minus filter in Serum to turn anything into like a Bandles kind of sound. If you guys know them, their dubstep is kind of like fun and silly and stuff, and it kind of has like a really interesting all of their stuff has a sort of sound to it. And he was telling me, you know, he can take anything and turn it into like a Bandles type of sound by using the flange minus filter. So little things like that, and also building off your own instruments and like repurposing them is really important too. Let's see. Also, again, let me know if you guys have any questions too. You can unmute yourself. Let's see, what else? This is a really fun Reese. This is like a more traditional style. Basically, you are using two saw waves, or using two wavetables that are the same. They don't have to be saw waves. They could be something else. Usually you get the best results with saw waves, though, just depending on what you're going for. And you detune them, not by using like a unison or even fine. You can do fine, but if you really want to have it be really like chuggy, doing a full semitone is the best way to do it, and messing with it from there. Here's just like simple distortion, OTT, and then another filter. This is an adaptation too of a video that Sultan made on his Reese. So go to YouTube and watch that, because you can basically just make this whole thing. And I have like little tweaks, but it's like really not that much different. But it's a really good, useful video to take a look at. But there's that. There's our boy Amp, which is really important for stuff like this. It's huge in this sound. Because it really pushes everything. And Amp also really, this is just stock Amp, and it's in heavy mode actually, so it does switch, because I think it starts in boost or blues, whatever. But basically, one of the key things about this Dimension Wider is just using a Serum effects, and you just have it split by band here. So you have audio effects racks One thing that I found like useful for EQ3, because normally I don't use EQ3, I accidentally click on it and I load it into a track and it's like, ugh, gross. But it's a really good way to use it is just by using it to split bands in different racks here. So we have high and low, and we just split them that way. And there's another really cool trick actually with EQ3 that I learned the other day. I'll show you guys right now, actually. EQ3 creates a lot of phasey, dispersey weirdness. And so, oh, we're running out of time. Hold on. 1 second. Actually, wait. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna stop share for just a second, guys.
If you need like one of us to host, we could do that, and we have like unlimited time through the like our student accounts. So
yeah, dude, we can do that. Here, let me. What I'll do is I'll show you guys this, and then we'll switch. Because I just realized I'm on this other account.
Yeah, completely forgot that was a thing.
Fucking Zoom, dude. Okay. But basically, EQ3 creates like a lot of really cool like phasey distortion. So if you take an EQ3 and you group it, and we take these macros, we put one of the frequency, the splits to one macro and the other one to another, and you duplicate this EQ3 a couple times. Has to be like 5 times or more. Basically, and this is a pixel terror thing. You can create a really cool like growly growl using this, like that traditional. You can already hear like the difference, like as you hear right now. If you guys know disperser, like kilohertz disperser, it's basically the same thing, but this lets you. It's kind of cool because you can just take these bands now that I've multiplied it across, and do some automation, and it'll create weird growliness. So it's really good for creating like really wet sounding things. The other thing you can do is combine this with like vocoder and change the like the formants, and then make that also really wet sounding too. But anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that. That's like a good use for EQ3, that, and then this this other way to do it. OTT, saturator, trash. Trash is really important on this one too. There's a lot of beef in this. This is just using Blues Driver. This is just the Blues Driver distortion preset. Everything else is just the same. So even just using it that way is really important. The thing that I think is coolest about this bass is the use of vocoder, because vocoder, man, I've just always been like so not impressed by vocoder. And then I realized that it's just that I don't know how to use it. This is crazy because it's just stock, but like that sounds cool by itself. But what vocoder does is it kind of smooths out the top end, and it really like adds to the like kind of like that higher sub frequency like wubbiness. So you see, and that sounds cool, and it has like a lot of high end. But if I turn that up and I listen to it loud, it'd be too much. But if we have vocoder on, it smooths it out. And it gives it that kind of like speaker sound to it, kind of like what amp delivers. Like it sounds like it's coming out of like a guitar cabinet. Utility just for gain staging, EQ, bring up the highs a little bit, saturator, and that's all that one is. So that one's really cool too. Let's see how much time. Oh, we got 5 minutes left. I'm just gonna keep going. This Reese here, this is another, this is just one that I made in Serum. The reason I have it bounced down to audio, and this is another really important thing too, if you guys are like trying to figure out how to create space in your tracks and make sure that everything has room and that your drums are hitting really hard, is bouncing your stuff to audio once you've kind of committed to the way that it should be. Also because with Reese's and other basses, they're so weird and they change a lot. They have a lot going on that sometimes if you play it one way, even if you've like made sure like your random knobs are down, like this one's not the case. But sometimes leaving those up gives you different timbres as you go through. So it's important to like bounce stuff to audio and do it multiple times. So I can sit here and just bounce this to audio and save one over here, run it again, save it over here, save it again, and then pick the best one essentially. It also allows you to fade in the edges, which is also really important for this type of thing. So you have your stuff at, when you fade it, you have it start at the zero crossing. It's important because also this type of thing adds to the impact of your sidechain because your sidechain is already happening. And if you have something faded in like that, it just makes sure that there's even less silent or even more silence going on when those things hit. So that way it can really punch through. Like crazy enough, a lot of the reason that I see people's drums hitting so hard is because they have sidechains that are actually really restrictive in terms of how everything else works. Like let me see if I have it on this one. This is a little different because it's drum and bass. So if I'm making dubstep, my sidechains are a lot crazier. But in this case they're a little tighter like this. But in dubstep, you might see me go like this and have a lot of silence and bring this like all the way over here and do this kind of thing. And not only that, but when my basses are done, bounce them to audio and then fade them in at every kick and snare. So that way it really makes sure that there's a good amount of silence. And if you're using a good kick sample, it can punch through really hard. And so that's really important too. So let's save that.
Do you
right.
sidechain your...
Yeah, I can hear you, Zach.
Oh yeah, okay, cool. Do you sidechain your snare in drum and bass?
I do, but only like a little bit. I used to do it when I was not very learned in the genre. It's like where I started out like loving electronic music. And then when I switched to dubstep, I was doing that for a really long time. The way that I do it is I have two volume shapers that are in this sidechain audio track, and everything feeds into this audio track that I want sent to the sidechain. So certain things don't go there, like vocals. But basically the way that it works is that each one of these is for the kick and the snare. So the kick looks like this. I messed with it, so just ignore it. But normally it's a lot tighter, especially for a track like this, where I'm not using like I'm not doing like a big drum and bass kick and snare. I'm doing like a kick, like a very, very short, tight kick with like snaps and claps as the snare. But the sidechain for the snare usually looks like this. So it's not even ducking the whole way. And also it's also really tight. The other thing you can do is if you have volume shaper or something like that is to make it so that you're only sidechaining certain bands. So like if I pull this down, I can just sidechain. Another thing too is like it's really weird, but the frequencies show up down here so you can actually see where you're cutting it off. But basically you can sidechain only what you need to sidechain. That's a really important one. This one's a little different. I would probably like pull this down here, but this one's so empty, this track, that it's like, who cares? It sounds fine. So that's the way that I would do that. Okay, we got less than a minute. So I'm going to stop this share. And then Judo, you send the new link and then we'll join it again.
Yeah, for
okay,
sure.
Cool. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks, though.
Yeah, I'll leave so I can create the new link.
Cool.
I realized I left it alone for a while, and I realized that I was sidechaining the snare super hard, and I was like, oh, this sounds awful. What am I doing?
Yeah, dude. The worst thing too is like I got a track back from mastering. Like sometimes if I go through certain labels, they have like through Play Me, there's a guy in the UK that does the mastering for like, he does some mastering for Cone Sound and like other like funk hunters. So I'm like, hell yeah, I want him to master my tracks. Like I can't do good as job as him. So like, yeah. And I remember getting one back and it was like this trap song. The one that I just had like released like this, not that one, this one. And the little trap snare was triggering the sidechain for everything. And I was like, holy shit, I gotta like take that out, because don't do it if you don't need to do it, basically. And that's like such a good like rule of thumb for everything in production. Don't do it if you unless you really, really need to. And like sometimes I know that like when I was beginning and even now, like you hear stuff from people like that and you're like, well, how am I supposed to know when I need to do it or not? And the answer is like, you kind of won't. You just have to practice at it. And that's how you figure out what you need to do and how to like, you know, how to do things like with a little bit of details instead of like pulling in and throwing OTT on everything and always high passing everything and stuff like that. Cool. So yeah, so let's see. So that's this guy. Let's just take a look at this one really quick, and then we can go to like a different track, just because this is basically the meat of this one. There's like little other things, but this is like basically it. The other thing that I really like to do when I'm running patches and doing sound design is turning on the sub oscillator, or in Vital, having the third oscillator or one of the oscillators be like a sub tone. And even not automated, these ones have the level is just static. There's like no LFO movement on this one because all of the stuff that I did was later on in post-processing. But basically having a nice sub run direct out of Serum over the top of whatever you're doing, and then running it into like a saturator like Decapitator, which is the first thing after this one, gives you, it like wields, like crazy stuff happens, especially if you have movement on these LFOs for these oscillators, but not the sub. The tails of them will have these really like big, like kind of washy, distorted kind of sound to them, which sounds really cool. And you can take those and bounce those into audio and mess with those. It's even crazier when you run reverb through that stuff first. So like if I could turn on reverb here and run that through the distortion and the Decapitator and stuff like that, you create like a really cool, like weird tails that you can then take and like tame them or slice them into audio and throw them into a sampler and play with them that way and stuff like that. So Decapitator is probably pretty important for this. Oh, we're not listening to the right one. This one has like a really forward sound, and it's really wide too. I think like a lot of the movement came from LFO Tool. The other tip that I think is super useful in a lot of ways, not just drum and bass, but also specifically drum and bass and just other genres, is using LFO Tool for movement. This is actually running with a filter from LFO Tool. So this has the this basically has the movement built in. So and it's after one of our the Decapitator, but before a lot of the other distortion. Having your movement happen before all that stuff, which is kind of like, that's normally how it works anyway, because you're using the LFOs that are within your synth. But basically having that happen allows you to, it creates like a lot of a tighter sound when you run it through distortion. But anyway, LFO Tool is really great for just creating movement in certain loops. So like, let me see if I do it in here. What's this? That's just a shaker I made. Let's say I have samples like this. This is something that I learned from, well, just like watching videos, in particular Metric. If you guys listen to him, he's really cool. But basically, if I have like these hats here, and this is just straight hats, I like used a Barely Alive sample apparently. Sorry, that was really loud. This is really great and fine, and that's cool if you like really want to have something that's done straight, but it's a lot better, and there's a really good way to use LFO Tool to create movement without having to go in, if you're in MIDI, and change the velocity around, because you can do that. That's totally fine. But also if you have stuff in audio, or you have actual like basses or other things like that, it's really simple to just create a simple pattern like this. Oops. And pull one down like this. I'm a drummer, so I think about how drummers would play, and this is essentially it. There's going to be more of an accent on like the first hit, if they're playing eighth notes with like their stick, basically. And so even with stuff like this, you can create a lot better movement if it's running through this stuff here. Whoa, I changed that. Here we go. Sounds a lot more natural. You can also tame transients by moving these just a little bit like this. So if you have certain samples like that, then I could take that and I could bounce that into audio and then use that as like a little shuffly hat. Like you'll see like a lot of the stuff that I have over here. This isn't really like, there's not a lot of stuff going around here in my samples, but these are just some things that I really like to use. Like you can use like little breaks and other like pieces of, let's see, like this is a really nice like accent thing. And I would have done this with LFO tool on a ride. And it sounds a little weird right now because there's not a lot of other breaks going on. But if you have a breaks going in the middle of these things, like little rides like this, create the accent on here. So LFO tool is super good for this kind of stuff. I highly recommend using LFO tool to humanize your shit, basically, because it makes it sound a lot better. Yeah. The other stuff that I do for like drums here, these are like, this is like a really simple track, but that's it. Those are the hi-hats for this one. And then like there's a break, this very tiny break. Actually, this is a really important one too. I don't know if like Omar probably showed this to you guys, Kumarian, but basically if you have a breaks loop like this, what it's going to happen is it's going to, the warping mode is going to be set to, it's going to be set here. This will be set to 100. And if we listen to the break, it'll sound like this. It's really important for like old sounding breaks and just other transient, energy kind of like little samples and stuff like that. But basically, if we switch this to like, what I call like wall mode, basically, it doesn't really have like I don't know what the name is really. I bet it has one over here. Transient loop mode, loop back and forth, whatever, it doesn't matter. But basically, if I pull down this, it'll just pull down the tails of everything. And it'll create a lot tighter sounding drums. And it's really nice if you want to have that kind of open sound and kind of like intimate sound where there's not just a ton of stuff going on. So you just listen as I pull it down. So it's a lot tighter and it sounds a lot better in like a small little beat like this one. Last thing I want to show for this one is how I used, actually, no, you know what? I'll load the other one and I'll show this to you. Actually, any more questions on this one before I leave, before I go to the next one? No? All right, cool. We're going to take a look at Universe. Don't save. These two tracks are hopefully going to be coming out on Ram Records, actually. So I don't know when, though. Also, that was another thing that I wanted to say. If you guys have any industry questions, let me know. I'm not like a guru, in that department necessarily, but I have dealt with like labels and like smaller labels that are, somewhat easier to get onto, like Play Me, and like I have a release with MA Music that's coming out sometime soon, and Simplify and stuff like that. And also not even that, but just getting your tracks into the hands of bigger artists, because that's really the way to do it. I'll just do this. I'll just give you this little nuggets of info while we wait for this to load. But basically what I recommend you guys do, if you have, first off, number one, like make it super dope tracks and actually like get feedback on them and make sure that they're really good and send them to a bunch of people who you trust to actually give you feedback. Also, my DMs are open for any of you guys. If you ever want to send me a track, feel free to do it. I love actually helping people with that kind of stuff. And it doesn't really it doesn't take that much of my day to do it. And I think it's really fun and everybody learns something. So legit, seriously, hit me up anytime on any social media. I don't care. I'm always checking it. And I'll listen to it and I'll give you actual feedback because that's really important. So find those people that you can get actual feedback from. Make sure your tracks are really, really good. And then like we live in Discord times right now, and all these artists have Discords, and a lot of these artists have feedback sessions that they're doing. And so a really good way to get your tracks in front of people is just sending it in for feedback. I don't know if you guys know Space Yacht, but I mean, maybe you do. They run a lot of shows in San Francisco and LA and stuff like that. So they're really big on their shows that they have, and they have up and comers, and they have this thing called Tune Reactor that they do on Twitch where you can send in tunes and they'll listen to them and stuff like that. And I got a track signed with them just by sending a track in. And they didn't even sign that track. They wanted me to send the rest of my tracks to them, which I did. And then they signed a different one. So, that's a good way to do it. And also literally just hitting up artists on Twitter if their DMs are open, be like, hey, dude, can I send you some tracks? And they'll usually not answer first, but if they do answer, they'll be like, yeah, sure, email it to this, whatever. And if you have that email, save the email somewhere, because then you can use it to send them music when you have it come out or when you have other stuff. But basically, if you can send that stuff to them and get it in their hands, they're always looking for unreleased tracks that nobody else has. So that way they can play it in their shows if they really like it. And also they'll share it with their managers if they really like it, or they'll share it with the labels they're affiliated with if they really like it. And the best way to get in with labels is to legit have a human connection in some way to one, because if you're sending it in just cold emailing, it's low chance that they'll get back to you unless they're a label like Play Me, which actually does listen to all their demos, which is how they've found my tracks. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that. But super important to just have really good tracks, and then just try to meet artists as much as you can, and then just send stuff to them. Okay, Universe. This one has a lot of really cool portal work, I think, mainly the beginning synth here. Oops. Like this little bit. Those are all just little snippets of portal audio. And what I did was, let me see if I can figure it out. This is all basses. Here we go. So we have, what is this? Simple preset. Sidetrack. I'm going to show you guys this Reese because I think it's kind of cool. And it uses something that I think is fun to do with Reese's to give things movement, which is, at least I think this one does, which is using chaos filters or chaos oscillators or whatever. I think that's what they're called. But basically, either use chaos oscillators, which are in the global section here, or you use the random, they're just random modulator if you're in Vital. And if you can throw this stuff on stuff like Reese's, it's really cool because it creates a lot of really wacky movement in the filters. Like if you watch. And it has a lot of that really I don't know, it basically just creates a ton of movement for these things. And what it does is it does them in a random way. So that way you can take it and just put it underneath stuff to have a low end that actually is cool and interesting to listen to, rather than just having a sub down there. Maybe subs are what we'll talk about in a little bit, because that's also super important. But yeah, anyway, so that's this Reese. It just has some weird chaos filters on the levels and the filters. And then we have, you know, like distortion, amp, OTT, distortion, overdrive, blah. You know, you guys kind of get the deal. Like throwing on this stuff and tweaking it little by little is like how you kind of work through this stuff. So, but anyway, here we go. It's I want to go to the like little melody here. Let's see what this is. I don't know if you guys can hear the weird kind of like melody kind of going on in the background, but basically that's happening through running through Portal, and I bet we have it on here, hopefully. Let's see. If I take Portal off, we're just hearing basically the notes that are playing right now, but having this Red Hills preset on there is basically adding all of this stuff. And so it's really cool to, it's probably like 50, but basically it's really cool to run stuff like really simple melodies like this, like I was talking about earlier, and running them through Portal. It's kind of how I made these two songs. They're kind of brothers, like I made them at the same time, basically. And then you can take those and bounce them to audio and create really, really cool atmosphere, because you have stuff that's being birthed like from the same like source of audio, but it's run through a bunch of different things. And if you pick elements that you can place in the frequency spectrum, in the stereo field, like in different spaces, you can create a really cool like full atmosphere. So like, what's this? This is just like a background piece that has a ton of reverb and stuff on it, and it's like jumping octaves, but it's mainly based off of this. And all I did was bounce it to audio. And so now I have this version into audio, which I can layer with this version, which is like more straight. So you can basically fill up more space and have your leads and your arpeggio sound cooler. That's just a chord. What's this? That's just another thing. Virtual Riot Atmosphere Pack. Let's go, dude. If you guys don't have this pack, get this pack. Also, like, you know, make your own atmospheres. But also if you're, you know, lazy like me, you know, no worries. Just get this pack because it's really great, and it has a ton of stuff, like all different keys and well, basically just major and minor, and then you know, whatever key you're in, you can choose from a big giant list. And I think he basically just runs them through a bunch of granular synthesis plugins that he has. He has like this specific one I remember watching him use that basically like smears audio, so it kind of creates this atmosphere type thing. That's also something that you can do in Portal, is you can run some of this stuff through, like if I switch this. I know, dude, Portal fucking output better send me a check, dude. But basically you can run it through like stretch and smear and all these different you know, presets, and it'll really like mess with stuff. So like, so anyway, like really cool, really cool, like little bits to mess with there. All right, let's keep going. What else haven't I gone over? I want to talk about subs really quick, just because we didn't talk about it in the last one. And I will refer you guys to another video. I'm glad you guys are recording this because I'm not writing these down. But there's Mr. Bill does a video on sub and making fat subs, and it's a lot more complicated than you actually might think. Essentially, the way that you want your subs to, basically the important thing to know is that loudness is is like amplitude over time. So basically you can run stuff through an oscilloscope like this, and you can take a look at what it basically what your sub looks like, and you can mess with it. So like if I run, I'm gonna load in like the actual main patch and show it to you guys. Load. You can also use this subrack to create cool bases later. But basically what we're doing is we're trying to create something that has, oops. We're having something that creates, that's like wider over time. So it's not just like a clean sine wave. And so the way that you achieve that is by actually doing like tiny bits of FM, even like an operator. I don't know if you guys know operator, or if you guys are in FL or Ableton or whatever, but basically running it through like tiny bits of FM, and then just like little bit of OTT, you know, like no upward compression, just a little bit of downward, and then like running it through just like a tiny bit of amp, and then basically just taking a look at an oscilloscope like this and just tweaking stuff until you find that you're creating like a really kind of like wide looking wave. You can tweak this stuff and you'll see how it changes if I add like too much amp. Like that's not going to sound very thick because we have a lot of the volume that's not up at the top and the bottom here. So we want it to kind of flatten out and be big and wide as possible. And also there's of course like a little bit of pitch envelope in the beginning that creates that kind of kick-like attack. So basically watch that Mr. Bill video, because I'm not going to waste your time since, you know, he goes over it all in depth. But I just wanted to show you guys that because if you're just running a clean sine wave as your sub, you know, do something else. Basically that can sometimes be really nice, but also having a really like fat one with nice harmonics that you can then control. You don't even have to let all this through. A lot of the time what I'll do with my subracks too is I'll turn, it doesn't really matter which one you do. I always do this one for some reason, but I'll turn this oscillator into white noise. And then what we'll do is, instead of running, actually we're doing it here, instead of running these in serial, you run them in parallel so that they're not FMing each other or affecting each other. And then what you can do is you can just introduce like a little bit of white noise. Oh, where's my white noise? Hello. Let me show you here. Oops. Oh shit, this created a whole new one. Okay. Basically I'll just run this white noise. And we'll run it through like this. Oh, you know what? I know what I did. This was closed, but basically here, I'll open that up. And a lot of people have this kind of white noise going on with their sub. One thing you can do too to control this type of thing is to not let these low mids come through, because those are really what eat up your headroom and cause a ton of muddiness when they're mixed with your basses. But basically have like a good healthy cut in this area. And you can kind of choose which harmonics you want to take out. Basically, like you can kind of hear what I'm talking about, and a lot of people just let this kind of stuff go through. So having like a sub that has a nice impact and some of that FM and some of that like grittiness and the amp going on, and also you can open it up and add white noise, maybe take out some of these, because this is like danger zone right here. the main thing that I run into with students that I do one-on-one lessons with is that they have trouble figuring out what frequencies they need to tame, and this is a really good area to start because that's where a lot of muddiness is born, and it can really help you when you're trying to clean up your tracks. Anyway, let's go through this. Anybody have any questions, actually, just really quick? No? All right, cool. This here is like the main race in this track. Here, I'll just play this drop really quick. So that's like the main race here. This one is made with a similar way as like all the other ones. Let me just unfreeze this. I know we're just like talking about Reese's today, but they're really sweet. So like this is that Reese. Let me like go to like here. With just like that much, it's a pretty strong like sound in its own, and then like a good amount of like reverb to create like the atmosphere, and the drops is also really important. And so just doing that can make stuff sound really big, and I think that's what is the main feature of this one. And this is like one of the first kind of like drum and bass tracks I wrote that I think is actually, you know, somewhat good. So this one just has like a classic blend wavetable, which is just like basic shapes essentially. Saw wave, some white noise it looks like, and then again the classic growly filters, low pass, notch, moving in different directions. And then also another thing that I have is this macro knob, and this is sometimes what I'll do for Reese's too, especially if you're trying to make like a foghorn bass. You have something that opens up over time and gets more FM'd over time. And, you know, basically you're taking it from like a low to like kind of like a squeal. It's really cool to be able to have a macro knob that will let you adjust those settings. So I'm pretty sure. So it's on the FM here. It's probably on a lot of these effects. There's a flanger effect. There's this phaser, filter in Vital is pretty cool because it's basically just like it could be like a double notch. You can also have it go a little bit crazier. And I have that set on the macro as well. So it's just sweeping through. And the key to making a good Reese is having EQ cuts and boosts that are like going around each other and moving around and just have a ton of movement. And then you take those and you process them. And after you process them, you can even do that again and add more of that stuff in here. So like you'll see, like I have a lot of dips out here taken. These aren't moving around at all, but I could totally modulate these. I could use like LFO in the Max for Live, or like LFO tool even if you wanted to. But the Max for Live version, you can just use it to map to certain things. Also, yeah, basically you can just run that through and cut out these frequencies that you don't like. Will create a lot of really cool timbre. So this will probably like sound pretty different if I take this off. It's actually not that much of a difference, but it's probably because it's running through like a ton of distortion and stuff like that. But the same thing goes for this one as the other ones that I was showing you guys. Basically, there's simple wavetables, simple, you know, like this is like a relatively simple like effects chain right here. There's a little bit dips in here. This is just classic OTT distortion. You have a flanger going on. The flange crusher is actually what's giving it width and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I probably had to check the stereo field or mono compatibility down the line here. But there's that. This has a corpus on it, which is crazy. I don't know why, but actually I do know why. There's this setting here. If you basically, here, I'll just do it from scratch. It kind of is, oops. It kind of creates, hold on, this one, a new one. It kind of creates like a really saturated sound if you set it to pipe and you turn the radius all the way up and decay all the way down. And you can even turn the dry wet all the way up and then tune it to whatever key your song's in. It just adds like extra oomph. It doesn't have that like traditional corpus sound actually. It's not just like some weird metallic tail that it adds to it. It kind of like saturates it in a way. So that was what's going on really right here. So just another interesting way to use corpus. I learned that from like Tisoki, I think. Autopan is just for little flares down the line and little movement. I put it earlier on in the chain so that the distortion can kind of like mask it. So it's not totally like wobbling and volume and cutting it in and out. Camel Crusher, you know, I don't know why I can't see it right now, but basically that's always a good one. I use that. It's actually on Annihilate, which is pretty interesting because normally I'm using British Clean, OTT, cutting a lot of the highs here. They were probably getting out of control, and also it's brought out later on with Camel Crusher, multi-band compression. This is just to tame the low end because it was moving around too much. And when I bounced it to audio, I wanted to have it set here. I don't think this is, actually, I am using a separate sub. So interestingly enough, I probably took it and then when I bounced it to audio, I cut it out. Or it's still there. No, wait, here we go. There it is. So that's another thing to pay attention to. The moment that you decide like use the sub from the actual bass or use like a separate sub is really a case-by-case basis. But I would encourage you guys to try to not use a separate sub sometimes because it can create really big like chuggy low end just like really quick. I have this like I don't know, I just like went off one day and I have this really like cheeky this song basically, which I'm actually working on with Decadon now, but the sub in this song is not a separate sub. It's just what happened because of like the layers of stuff. But here, I'll show you. Let's get in trouble. Anyway, it sounds kind of like bad in a good way because it's like a tear out song. And like if you listen to Must Die, you know what I'm talking about because that dude mixes his tracks on laptop speakers. And you know how, I don't know, but that's what he does. And it's fun having sub that's like weird and stereo sometimes. Like if it sounds good, that's what's cool. Like in some of the lessons that I've done, like with bigger producers like Vandals, again, one of the things that he told me was basically like my like post-processing and mixing that I was doing like sounded too good to the point where it sounded too, like everything sounded a little too nice and flat because of that. There wasn't stuff popping out at you. There wasn't a lot of like crazy use of the stereo field and like, you know, sounds kind of jumping around, like distracting you and stuff like that. It was all very just like, oh, there it all is. You know what I mean? And sure, some of the sound design sounds cool, but it's not enough these days to have that. You have to have stuff that's like kind of weird sometimes. So if you can pull out really weird sub from tracks, you can actually make it sound really cool and kind of just like, I don't know, just like messed up. And if you run that through like limiters and stuff like that, then you can get that kind of blown out sound, like barely live. So yeah.
Real
Yeah.
quick, kind of related to that, especially like tear out. I was wondering, do you clip your masters?
I do.
Because I know a lot of people do that.
I do. One thing I was watching. I'm kind of like I'm referencing so many videos today, but like that's where all my knowledge comes from. Back when I was in college and I was doing, we had a music producers club, but it wasn't, I don't think, probably as involved as your guys's, and so I didn't have like a ton of friends in it. So like my friends were YouTube videos, and that's where I learned all my stuff. So this is just me regurgitating that stuff to you, but it's like a collection of all that stuff that you learn over time that creates, being good at making tracks, I guess. And so there's, I've been using K-Clip. I really like K-Clip. Holy shit. Yeah. So this one's this is actually a really good thing to talk about, because some people, I've since kind of like eased up on the complication of my template. There's certain templates out there that are really cool that have basically like, it's kind of like bus mastering, if you will, where you're limiting your groups in stages before they go into a pre-master, and then limiting it there, and then that goes into a master, and that gets limited there. And the whole point is to basically ease up the work on your final limiter, so it's not doing so much work to cut peaks, so it can actually push volume a lot. And so since then, I've kind of like simplified it. I might actually go back, just because that's really actually how people get such fat mixes. Like that comes from like this Skrillex videos that he released of like Mumbai Power and stuff, where he's just like scrolling through his Ableton project file. You can see the way that he organizes everything. And I'll name him again. Ahi does a video that kind of dissects it, and also other people talk about it too. When I was doing lessons with Vandals, they were talking about it as well. They called it gain staging, which is not technically correct. Gain staging is a different thing, but basically it's like mastering. So so I do clip this stuff, and I mix loud. So all this stuff that is all this stuff that is here, I just have basically at 0, running everything at 0. There's certain elements that I pull down, but like my main elements are up at 0. Some are even boosted like a little bit more. And I know like a lot of my effects, which are up here, those end up getting pulled down usually about 6 dB just automatically before I even run them through anything else. But I clip, I still do my own mastering in some tracks. Like my NCS track was mastered by myself. This is traditionally what that kind of looks like. I turned off Soothe here because it takes a lot of CPU, but that's really important. But I'll just kind of go over really quick. EQ, here she is. This is pretty standard. I'm pulling down a lot of stuff, kind of like big. Actually, like I probably would do this like a little bit less. Like I would probably ease up on the Q here. But I'm pulling off high end and low end, and then I'm pulling out everything that's lower than like 100 hertz on the sides. That also depends on the track too. Sometimes if you let some of that stuff go, if you're making like crazy stuff, like no rules, dude, no rules. So it's like, it's cool to like sometimes leave that stuff in, and you'll find like if you analyze some pro tracks, there's a lot more going on in the stereo field and the low end that you would think. A lot more. It's like really weird. So some mastering engineers don't actually care about doing even this or this, even though it's sometimes a good way to get a little bit more clarity. Then I have Soothe. This is just do you guys know Soothe? Soothe is sick. You should get Soothe too. Soothe is really great. It's like a nice fixer-upper for when you're going into mix. But this is just a preset for mastering that just eases the top end a little bit. And then we have multiband compression. This is also a preset that I probably eased up on quite a bit. That's just a good way to do it if you find that your tracks don't sound, they sound a little too, the mix sounds a little disconnected, I guess is the best way to put it. This kind of like puts on that bit of like sheen that kind of glues everything together just a little bit. Oftentimes I'll run this in parallel while I'll pull this down too. But usually it's just a matter of tweaking these thresholds and pulling everything back. So it's not really doing it, because these presets are a little bit crazier than you might think, especially for electronic music, because the levels that you're running into this thing are a lot louder than like, you know, other genres. So next thing, this is just a fun one, True Iron. I don't know, I've just been messing around with this. This is like, it emulates like what, transistors or whatever, and basically if you run this through, if you run your stuff through this plugin without anything on, if you haven't even tweaked any of the settings, it'll just add like a really cool warmth to everything. And I'm just running this in parallel, so it's kind of nice. It's just like a little bit of thickness, not a big, not anything crazy, and I really like it for that reason. There's even mastering presets on here that you can use too, but I often just pull this down and maybe like turn up the strength a little bit, because actually it really adds a good amount of meat to your tracks, which is cool. But you know, it's one of those things that it's probably not totally necessary. This is then I run it through K-Clip, and K-Clip is usually just pushing it. This is actually quite a bit. Normally I'm only pushing it like, normally I'm only pushing it like 4 dB at the max speed. This one can really push it a lot. The problem is that it can create mixes that are a little harsh if you don't control it. So the other one that I've been using a lot more that you guys might have seen before is Invisible Limiter. This is the one that everybody's using these days. It's the hot new limiter, blah, 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 blah. But basically, like, you can, a lot of the times what I'm doing now to try to like kind of create cleaner mixes, just in general, my mixing as I sound design and as I write is getting better. And so the mastering steps that I have to take are less and less. And that's just something that you learn over time. When you start putting in good quality source audio, it just takes a lot less of tweaking in the end. But normally, like what it'll look like is I'll just like bump this guy up to like 3 dB. And that's usually like where it starts to, like, obviously it'll start to distort if I go up too far, but I'm running pretty loud audio through it initially, so it doesn't need to go up that high. This, you know, I'll take to 0 dB. So Invisible Limiter is good. The other thing you can do, if you are a dubstep guy, or, you know, just a in general crazy music guy, this is something that I learned watching, I think it's Subtronic stream, and who can clip better than him, you know? So let's see, EQ Clip Master, here we go. This is something that I remember, like he said, and also something that he said he learned from Virtual Riot. What you can do, this kind of goes along the same lines as the bus mastering that we were talking about, and like having stages of limiting that eases up the load on your final limiters, the ones that are pushing a little bit of gain. But basically what you're doing here is you're taking, so if I didn't have this K-Clip in here, oh, also, this is nothing. This is just a AB plugin, which is pretty sweet, actually. It's cool. It's got like loudness meters and stuff, which are really nice. This is like my main one that I use to just check my LUFs and stuff, because I don't really have any other ones, and I already had this one. And I think it's pretty cool. You can key map the AB switch to like a key on your laptop, which is what I do, and then you can listen to whatever ones you want. You can load in all these other ones. I was referencing some Camo and Crooked, which makes sense for this type of track, because they can get really loud, really tight mixes and stuff. But so this is basically nothing, but it is a pretty cool plugin. You know, you can look at stereo image and all that stuff. But basically, what you're doing here is you're cutting your low shelf. This is on the whole mix, clipping it, not boosting it or anything like this. If you don't know K-Clip, this is just standard. This is what happens when you load it in. Basically, everything's off. It's just, all it's doing is it's going to cut anything that's going over 0 dB. And then you're boosting your lows back in the same amount that you took them out before, and then you're clipping it again. And this is where you might add gain later on. And the reason is if you do this, you can get your stuff to sound a little bit punchier and just like a tad bit fatter, because this first one doesn't have to deal with all this low end. All this low end in the beginning. And then it can like probably get it, you know, a lot louder. So that's another way to do it. But sometimes if you're working on a track that's a little bit crazy, or you know, your sound design is just like a little whack and there's like too much high end and stuff like that, this can emphasize that, which is not as good. So if you want to go with something smoother, which sometimes I do, I'll use invisible limiter. So those are the ways to do it, basically. But the way that this template is set up, just to give you kind of like an idea, is that we have all these groups, and we have, like, I have my subs down here, which are going to the side chain. My drop elements are going to the side chain as well. Here we go. That's going to the side chain. Then we've got melodic elements. Those are also going to the side chain. Cymbals are going straight to the master because those sit on top, and I don't really need those to be sidechained. If I do want those to be sidechained, those can go into like a different group, like this drum layers group that is going to the sidechain. It's important to have like, this is just another thing for breaks. If you're using like a lot of loops like this. Oh, my CPU hates us. Where's Soothe? Soothe is always the problem. There we go. And you don't want the kick to come through. You can run those through the sidechain to make sure that that's happening. Another quick tip is like if you have this kilohertz transient shaper, you can actually turn this into like a sidechain ducker, basically, like a volume automation. And the way that you do it is you just turn side. This is not happening on this one. I don't know why. I was probably just like lowering the attack and sustain. But basically, you can turn the sidechain on, and then I can run, you know, wherever my kick snare is. I can run my kick snare through here. And what I can do is just pull the attack down. And what it'll do is it'll trigger that every time a kick and a snare hit, so that it ducks whatever's running into it. So it's just like a really quick way to do sidechain compression if you want something to be ducked by actual audio that's not using a compressor. And it actually sounds really tight. It's nice. You can adjust the speed, which is cool, which is like would be like adjusting the threshold and that sort of thing. Yeah. And so cool. That's that. But yeah, so there's certain, those are running through the side chain. Drums are going straight to the master because those need to poke through. Vocals going through the side chain, which is interesting. There's not like an actual vocal on this track. A lot of the times those don't go through there because they're sitting on top. Effects go to the side chain sometime. And then you have triggers here. These are just the MIDI notes that are triggering the shaper boxes that are, everything is running through this one chain of audio, and that's going to the master. So like in limiting, bus limiting and stuff, I would have maybe like have limiters on here, and it would go through different limiters before it goes to the master and gets all summed up. But yeah, I've been like going off on these two tracks. So I just want to, and I know like we're getting kind of late here, so probably we'll probably end up stopping soon. But do you guys have any questions before I go? Or do you want to see anything from any of the other tracks that you might have heard, like really quick before I go? That way we can kind of talk about them.
I guess just a general question. I was just wondering about your like musical background and how you got into the production or the music like industry. How you got into production, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I play the drums, and the way that I started was just playing in a band in high school. And like, that's how I started my journey, like with music. And I taught myself how to play, and then I was doing that. Then in college, I like picked up DJing because, you know, why the hell not? That's fun and cool, and you can do it by yourself. And I'd always been messing around with production, not very seriously, for a really long time. I started out using Reason. I don't know if any of you guys have used Reason, probably not. But like Reason was where I like got my start just messing around in college. And then I was kind of, you know, more into DJing back then. And then I got more serious about producing once I got out of college, and then started to actually try to make stuff that I thought was good, and just like did a lot of practice there. So I've been doing it for Oh boy, like probably like 8 years now. That would be like the beginning of me not being very serious, but more serious in the past like 4 years. And once I like came back to Seattle after going to Western, there was just basically there were these guys running these nights at certain clubs, and I met people in this group. They were called Bass Therapy at the time, and that's how I got like a lot of the shows in the beginning, and kind of got into like more into the industry and started like meeting people and doing that. But that was just shows. Interestingly enough, like doing those shows were what allowed me to meet people like KJ Saka, who runs Impossible Records, which is which is a very small, tiny label. And KJ's I don't know if you guys know KJ Saka. He's known for basically doing his own thing and also being the drummer for Pendulum. He also drums for Elenium, and just he's just a crazy good drummer. So like doing like little shows like that and having like knowing the people that were running shows and booking people like KJ allowed them to send my stuff to him. So again, if you guys can get any sort of like personal connections, even if it's not like a first connection with somebody, that's a really good way to get into it. And I know that sucks because like it's like how do I do that sometimes? But sometimes if you can get into like little shows that are happening like that, or like I said earlier, just sending your music to people, that would be the way. So anyway, like I released music on Impossible Records. That stuff is out there in the ether. It's okay. It's not like my best stuff, but it's pretty good. And once I did that, then I was just really focused on trying to make tracks that would get me to the next level. The next level ended up being Play Me Records, and they're really great because they're run by Reed Speed, and she's been in the scene forever doing drum and bass. And she basically, that record label was really a really cool kickstart. Like Kumarnan got his start there. I'm, basically getting my start there. He's incredible. And so he has all these releases and all this stuff, coming out, and all this stuff that he's working on, which is insane, which I don't know if he told you guys. I'm not going to tell you because I probably shouldn't, but like basically he's got like all this stuff. And that's where he started. And then he went on from there to go release on other labels. But the more that you can get on like little labels like that, and then keep pushing yourself forward, that's really important. Because then as you get better, your stuff will be way more appealing to those bigger labels. And that's kind of like the goal, to land those in the beginning. So then you can potentially have like managers start reaching out to you because they see the stuff that you have coming out, and they want to be a part of it, and they'll offer to be your manager basically. So that's kind of like how I got into it, and that's where I am now. Yeah. You guys, any other questions?
Thanks for showing us everything. I learned a lot.
Dude, I'm glad. Sometimes I don't know if I actually am helping.
No, that helped a ton.
Yeah. But like I said, for real, you guys all have free ticket to just hit me up on like, I don't know where you would hit, anywhere, it doesn't matter. Instagram, Facebook, if you can find me on there. My name's Chase, by the way. Holy shit, I didn't say that at all. My name's Chase. My last name is Golka, Golka. So if you guys find me on Facebook, it says Rebel Scum in parentheses. Just friend me on there, and then you guys can always message me there, or Instagram or Twitter or SoundCloud. I don't care, because I'm not like a crazy big artist, so I actually look at all that stuff when it comes in. But yeah, just hit me up anytime. I'll help you out. I also do lessons. If any of you guys are interested in lessons, I'm not really doing that many right now. But if you guys ever wanted to do like a one-on-one lesson, you can hit me up about that too. Oh, hey, Brian. Hi.
Hey, Chase.
Have you been here the whole time?
Most of it, yeah.
Cool. Anyway, hit me up if you want to do lessons. I only do like $30 an hour, so and hopefully they can help, and then we can like look deep dive into any tracks you guys have. But also definitely hit me up, because giving feedback is super important, and you know, maybe I can learn something from you guys too. Oh shit, maybe I can learn something from you guys too, because that's the best way to do it, is to have like a little community like you guys have, and to actually have people that will tell you where you need to improve and where you don't. So yeah. Cool. Any last things? Any last words from anybody? All right, cool. Yeah, hit me up. It was really good talking to you guys. Thanks for inviting me out here. If you guys have any questions also about any tracks that I released or anything like that, let me know. Be happy to like talk it over. Also, I'll be in the Discord too now too, so you guys can hit me up on there. Actually, that's a good place to DM me as well, because I think I'm in the group. So if you guys just find me on there, just like let me know. But yeah, thanks for having me out, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys and see your guys' music later. And yeah, send me your stuff, even if it's like released and stuff like that, because I'd like to hear it too.
Sweet. Right. Well, thanks for joining us. I really learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else did. So
cool. All right, guys, have a good one. Do good. Keep doing it. Peace.